Let's talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Will the Tampa Bay Buccaneers remain the kings of the NFC South? I don't know, man. I love myself some Baker Mayfield. I was calling it several years ago when he first joined the Bucs. He was going to revitalize his career with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and I was right. And then came Liam Cohen, and it made Baker Mayfield look even better. Man, it's like Baker Mayfield played really well the last 2 years to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I even thought there could have been a slip back, but when they added Liam Cohen, who was going to add an even more efficient offense compared to what Canales was running, I was impressed. And now they lost Liam Cohen. That's a big question going into this offseason, right? No Liam Cohen. Chris Godwin is coming off an ankle injury, so we'll see how quickly he kind of gets to be back into the speed of things. And also, we're finding out now Tristan Wirfs, the left tackle, just had his knee scoped. And at this moment in time, he is most likely going to miss a couple of games to begin the season. Might start out the season on the PUP, which means he misses 4 games, which is kind of a scary thing if you're a big backer of the Buccaneers, because you want your stalwart left tackle to be there. And listen, man, starting out the first 4 games, at least you can game plan for that. They could still sign somebody, a Jedrick Wills, a Donovan Smith. They could bring somebody in to maybe kind of fill in that gap. But depends on how they feel about the guys in-house, who I'm not, I kind of looked over the roster on this one. I was not excited to see what they have in-house as far as, I think it's Charlie Heck is the backup tackle who's got the most reps so far at being a backup tackle. I'm not loving that. Maybe they go ahead and sign a veteran free agent to see who else can maybe pop in and play a couple of games for them. We can hope, right? For the Buccaneers' sake, we can hope. I do like the rest of the team. I like that they brought back Mike Evans is now back, still again. They brought back Chris Godwin. They drafted Emeka Egbuka in the first round, who, man, I like him. I like him a lot. I like that. I like Ohio State. You can't go wrong with Ohio State receivers, it seems like, right now in the NFL. It just feels like one of the safest bets is just going ahead and drafting yourself a good Ohio State receiver, whether it's JSN, Terry McLaurin, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave. All these guys have played very well so far in the NFL. I can't remember the last first round, or I can't remember the last Ohio State receiver taken in the first round or two that didn't play very well. And so I'm very excited to see them with Egbuka, especially because they still have Mike Evans. They had the last year of Jalen McMillan, who played really well last year in some spot starts and was kind of a good as a wide receiver 3. I think they're trying to prepare for life post Mike Evans, post Chris Godwin, especially Godwin. Yes, they extended him and brought him back, but kind of getting up there in age. How much are they going to get out of him over the next 2 years? They committed. And we'll talk about his contract maybe in a little bit, but let's talk more about the offense kind of going in, because now they're going to have Josh Grizzard, who was formerly with the Miami Dolphins before he came over to the Buccaneers, including 2 years as their wide receivers coach when the offense was under Mike McDaniels. If you know anything about Mike McDaniel, he used to be a wide receivers coach for the Cleveland Browns. And when he was there, he had earned a lot of respect around that locker room as a wide receivers coach who was very big on blocking. And he is just I'm a huge Mike McDaniel fan. I'm also kind of intrigued by Grizzard, who earned himself a promotion under Mike McDaniel to be the wide receivers coach, and then moved over to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to be the passing game coordinator. I think that shows you that this is a guy who's maybe in a good development, might be a guy that get poached next year too from them, because that's how it's been for the Buccaneers, right? Last 2 years, they lost 2 offensive coordinators, and they fought to keep Liam Cohen. They offered him as much money to keep him around as they could, and then they lost him to the Jaguars, and I think that's a good hiring. We'll see what ends up coming out of that, but I think Grizzard could be the sneaky kind of hey, we got to keep the guy. They kept the offensive line coach. They kept most of everything else there after losing Liam Cohen. They did not let Liam Cohen poach anybody, mostly because I think they were upset that Liam Cohen jilted them, after committing and saying oh no, I'll be back, you give me a raise, I'll take the raise, and then all of a sudden going, actually guys, they upped their offer and they kicked out the GM, and I'm going to get to pick my own GM. I understand it both ways. I understand feeling upset if you're the Buccaneers and not letting it go that way, and not letting him poach coaches from you that you have on contracts. I also understand it the other way around, where he's sitting there going like, hey man, like I got to take the job that gets offered to me, and like especially to be in a situation where I get to help pick the next GM for this franchise that I'm going to be hired for. That doesn't happen very often. Most coaches do not get to help pick the GM. So I think it was a smart move. I think it was a smart move on both accounts. But Grizzard was such a good in-house hire, right? Knows the offense. I think he's established himself pretty well in the NFL. It seems like there's a lot of big fans of him inside the building. And I like everything that they were able to do with the spacing, the way that they ran the ball, the play calling. I guess, again, we're going to have to see how he does with play calling in the NFL. I think that the difference between Grizzard and Liam Cohen is Liam Cohen had experience calling plays, at least in college. He had. That's why I knew like Liam Cohen was not going to be long for the Buccaneers at some point. It was either going to be this year or next year. He was going somewhere else. The Jags just upped their ante and went for him, and you can't knock him for doing that. Grizzard though, like I'm excited. I'm excited because again, he was an intricate part of the planning of this offense already. His experience with this offense, both with like potent offenses with Liam Cohen and with Mike McDaniel. And his longevity in the NFL, sticking around for, like, again, he was with the Dolphins for 7 years. He wasn't there just for, like, a cup and a soda. So I'm very intrigued to see where this team ends up going as far as the offense goes, if there's any kind of change-ups they do to it, because now they have a lot of new pieces here and a lot of cool pieces, right? Like, Godwin's going to be back. They could run 14 personnel. You look at this wide receiving room, right? You got Mike Evans, who, man, like, again, another 1,000-yard season, the ageless wonder. Now, this might be one of those years where we say this, and, again, you're talking about a guy in his 30s, but he has, like, quality. Like, here's the thing with Mike Evans. He's got qualities that keep him so much, like, there, right? Like, because he's got size, he's got dominance. It's hard to take that away from a dude. I think my one problem is that, the way you kind of extend that in the NFL is maybe running the guy out of the slot. And they did, that's happened in the past. They've run Mike Evans sometimes out of the slot, but getting him kind of like these easy matchups and utilizing his size and his still semi-existing speed. And, like, by the way, decent, like, really good route runner for a dude of his size. Like, legit, Mike Evans has earned his dominant rating as far as, like, being one of the best receivers in the game. Even though he doesn't get talked like that. Like, he's just a different kind of cat as far as a receiver goes. I think he's a huge part of the reason why Baker Mayfield had his resurgence, and then Baker Mayfield's confidence in the communication with the system, with the coaches, the offensive line, everybody there. I think that allowed him to kind of show, like, hey, man, Baker Mayfield can be a dude, which I always believed in. Like, and going back to, like, the Browns, when he came in on that Thursday night game and beat the Jets off of a Tyrod Taylor concussion, you kind of knew back then there was something to the dude. And after that, even, like, I guess he had his falling out in Cleveland, and then he went to Carolina, and then he went to the Rams for a hot minute and won a game off of an airplane 2 days. So listen, I could wax poetically about Baker Mayfield, but this is more about everything around Baker Mayfield, right? Because now we know Baker Mayfield is at least a top 10 quarterback, or can be. And has some potential maybe moving up that roster line, but, like, I kind of always felt like Baker Mayfield was always that solid, like, he's like Phillip Rivers or Matt Ryan, right? Like, yeah, you could put enough pieces around him to make him like this kind of, like, make him have like that all-pro season. You can do it. I think it's there. I don't know if it's this year that happens, but he kind of reminds me a lot of Phillip Rivers and Matt Ryan, where it's like you get the right play caller and the right weapons, and you can have that all-star season with Baker Mayfield. That was always my opinion of him. I didn't think he was transcendent. He can elevate to a degree. Like, we've seen him elevate, like, the offensive line 2 years ago, where he was just making dudes miss in the backfield. Like, he stays on his feet very well because he is kind of like, he's learned to kind of dodge, dart, and, like, he's learned the dodgeball moves, but in the NFL, as far as avoiding pressure and not getting sacked. And he's just, like, he is the weeble wobble kind of guy. Like, you try to get him down. We saw the stiff arm against Joey Bosa last year, and he goes ahead and he throws with one arm. And I mean, like, that's so dope to see that thing of like, and also, especially if you know the history of him and Nick Bosa. It's such a cool thing to get to watch and see. I could wax poetically about that guy for a long time. Let's move on to the rest of that room, though, of like the offense, because like I said before, offensive line wise, they've been putting effort into rebuilding it, right? They had a moment where they lost a lot of guys two or 3 years ago in the offensive line room to retirement, injury, and that was back when Baker came in, and they were kind of like, Goedeke got to move to right tackle. Goedeke has been a find, right? They initially trying him out at guard. Now he's a right tackle. He's played very well at right tackle for them. Tristan Wirfs, I mean, come on, like that. He's been basically an all-pro left tackle since he walked in. Actually, he's been an all-pro. He was a right tackle, moved to left tackle last year or 2 years ago, and has been so good for them as well at left tackle. So I look at what they've done with this tackle room, and again, not having Wirfs is what concerns me going into the season. It was a knee scope, so he should be back. So it's not going to be for the whole season. But my concern is, how do you get through those first 4 games? Because like in the NFL, you look at establishing kind of like winning game by game basis, right? Can you win this game? Can you build on your wins? And if you start out slow, if they're able to game plan around the fact that your left tackle's not playing. Now, again, they've had these issues before where they've been missing players, and they've overcome it quite a few times. I think at this point, knowing that they won't have Wirfs for at least the first couple of games and maybe for the first month, they can game plan around that, knowing who they're going to be playing against. I'm still concerned, especially knowing that, again, Godwin, we don't really know the full status of Chris Godwin. Ibuka, as much as I like him a lot, and I think he's going to be an intricate part of this offense, he's still a rookie. It's going to take time. Even if he plays like a vet, I still think that that's going to be a concern. Mike Evans is older. He's in his 30s. McMillan's got his second year in the offense. They still have Trey Palmer there. I'm not sure he makes it through camp. I think they end up trading him or he gets cut at the end because they added in the 7th round the wide receiver, Tez Johnson. And so I think that's a part that, and I do think part of the reason why they drafted Ibuka is not just because of Godwin's injury and Evans's age, but because they saw the offense, and they actually admitted this, I think, in one of the interviews, that the offense kind of took a dive down a little bit when they didn't have those dominant guys. Like, it wasn't that they weren't able to be competitive. They were. That was the impressive part. And this is what Baker Mayfield allows you to do, is that you're still competitive even when the top guys go down for a couple of games. But I don't know if he's going to make you But how many QBs are dominant or competitive when their top guys go down? Like Lamar Jackson. That's it. Now, I think Baker Mayfield's problem is, you had Lamar Jackson in the same draft. People always compare the two of them, and you have Josh Allen. Those are the two guys that maybe they're still dominant even when they don't have their top dudes, or if they don't have top dudes. And listen, Baker didn't have top dudes when he was always doing well. Like, you look at the year he got to the playoffs with the Browns, and it was his late stage Jarvis, and Odell went down middle of that season. So I do think that they look at that and they go, well, but we want to put all the best pieces around you, especially because Baker Mayfield's contract is really cheap. It's like a $33 million a year contract. You're paying not that much for a solid, I'm not even saying solid. Like, when Baker Mayfield plays at his top game, you're seeing a level of play that's kind of on, like I said before, on par with guys like Phillip Rivers and Matt Ryan, guys who used to be paid at the top of the NFL scale. You're paying discount money, again, less than what the Giants were paying Daniel Jones last year and the year before that. So I think that the receiving room is kind of a little concerning given the Godwin injury, the age of Mike Evans, but a lot of fun pieces, a lot of good pieces, a lot of things that make you go oh, I'm excited. And the team brought Godwin back, so they know that they said hey, we're committing to you, Godwin. We want you back. You're giving you money. We're giving you guaranteed money into 2 years of this deal. So they obviously feel good about his coming back on this injury. And they obviously didn't feel great about having to replace him anyway. So I look at this team as maybe they might have a slow start compared to what people were expecting, because you're going to have Grizzard kind of doing his first time play calling. But the other pieces on the offensive line, you look at Cody Mock, who took a step forward in year 2. You look at Graham Barton. He's played pretty well for a first-year center who wasn't really a center when he came in. But again, everybody looked at him as a center, and so he started at center for them. And then they actually got probably the best year to Ben Bredeson, which if Tristan Wirfs was there, I'd kind of feel good about it because you're getting the consistency of the starting 5 with Goedeke, Bredeson, Mock, Barton, and then Wirfs. With Wirfs not playing the first couple of weeks to a month, I might get a little bit more concerned about that situation. But it doesn't mean that we can't, figure stuff out. Like, it doesn't mean that it's totally, they're without. Again, there's time. There's a month and a half. There is time to figure that stuff out. And that's the good part about it. Now, again, could Wirfs have gotten this procedure done earlier in the offseason? Usually, these kind of things, the teams would try to push for that for sure. And especially with the knee scope, it was probably something they were semi-aware of. But players don't want to go ahead and get a knee scope. They don't want more surgery. They want less surgery. And if it could heal on its own, why would he want to go ahead and do that? In the end, I think the first month is going to be determinative of, hey, what pieces end up coming into the season healthy, how they handle that left tackle spot, et cetera, et cetera. The tight end room, Payne Durham, Cade Otton, solid dudes, not a O'Keefe. They haven't really, ever since they drafted O.J. Howard and kind of missed on him, or the injury, I think, didn't play very well with that either. I think that was a huge reason why O.J. Howard never really kind of ended up being O.J. Howard level. But I do look at the rest of that, offense and go okay, you look at the running backs. Bucky Irving played really well last year. I mean, there are people who are raving about him going into this year. I think he's getting a little too much hype now for a guy who I was a huge fan of, and I have him in at least one dynasty league. I'm almost kind of shocked how much people love Bucky Irving stock. Rachaad White, who might be not as good of a runner in between the tackles as Bucky Irving, but I mean, his receiving skills has been amazing. And those two guys together, they're very different kind of weapons as far as running backs go, which is kind of the shocking thing. I like that running back room. I don't know if I think Bucky Irving's a true star, but again, he played super well. I mean, his make you miss in the open field is amazing. I love watching so much of his tape when I get the chance to. So I am not knocking Bucky Irving. I'm just shocked at the level of love for Bucky Irving is really more. And again, his lateral agility, his ability to make him miss, his field vision, very good. He kind of steps up in the areas that maybe Rachaad White doesn't step up in. And Rachaad White, and both of them are good pass catchers too, so I could see ways of utilizing both those guys out of the backfield at the same time. In fact, they did it a bit last year. This offense is interesting, right? Because I think they definitely wanted to keep this offense healthy and going together and building on what they did. And with the injuries and some of the question marks, I have some concerns. Now, the start of their season is not the worst start of the season. So, they might be able to overcome playing, say, the Falcons, who they play week 1 with. But they lost to the Falcons twice last year. So if they're going into week 1 not healthy and the Falcons are going to week 1 healthy and the Falcons are game planning and knowing, hey, we beat them twice, let's go ahead and lean in on that. But we will see what ends up playing out on that side of it. Because, again, the Falcons are going to be playing a rookie QB. So I don't know how that's going to play out for them. And, he's not a rookie. Michael Penix isn't a rookie. He's year 2, but kind of essentially on his first year really starting, even though he did start a few games last year, it was kind of more of towards the end of the season, and you're kind of, now teams have tape on you. So can you adjust? Are they adjusting the offense to what he does well? I think they're going to lean on Bijan Robinson with the Falcons. And again, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have to overcome this in ways of stopping the run, which they've always been very good at. And this is what we're going to get into is the defense, right? How, a defense that I think had some struggles, but were game planned pretty well at different points. They had Breece Hall there. They drafted 2 corners in the day 2 of the draft because they didn't draft anybody. They didn't draft any defensive guys day 1. Ben Morrison from Notre Dame and Parrish. I think those 2 corners are kind of more of a hey, man, let's throw as much stuff to this room. And again, if we lose some guys like Zion McCollum, who's going to be coming up on a contract year, we have replacements in the building. By the way, Zion McCollum's played pretty well as far as a developmental guy. They still have Jamal Dean. I think there's been a lot of questions of whether or not they'll eventually move off of Jamal Dean, given his injury history. Kind of a similar situation to what they had with Carlton Davis. So I think they're throwing as much darts at keeping that room healthy, giving them a lot of options as far as corner goes with they still have Hall. They have McCollum. They have Tyke Smith, who might be moving into the slot a little bit. Isian's kind of played a bit of free safety and slot. Like, they got a lot of guys who move around. And the key cog to that back end of the defense, Antoine Winfield Jr. is still there. And hopefully, if he's healthy this year, like, that was a big issue last year. He just wasn't healthy. He wasn't on the field enough. But every other year he's played has been dominant. And I like that with my friend good Mr. Antoine Winfield Jr. And I think that's what the Bucs defense is. It's a lot of like solid dudes that they're able to coach up and develop pretty well on the back end with like key really strong pieces, right? Vita Vea on the defensive line. They drafted Kalijah Kancey a couple of years ago, and we've seen some moments where Kalijah Kancey looks like, oh, this is what they were seeing when they drafted him. Yaya Diaby's, taking a step forward. They brought in Hassan Reddick, which is why I think they felt okay with not drafting an edge rusher this year in the draft, at least in the top 3 rounds. They did draft 2 guys on day 3, but again, they didn't make it a priority. They also have Braswell, who's in year 2. He was a second-round pick from a year ago, and it seems like the GM is excited for what Braswell can end up doing for the Buccaneers. So you look at that edge rush room, and it's like, all right, if you get what Hassan Reddick was a couple years ago, interesting that Hassan Reddick picked the Buccaneers, a team that had Bruce Arians, involved with the inside the building, who used to be the head coach there. I don't know if he was really ever that familiar with Todd Bowles, but Todd Bowles is there. Todd Bowles is still tied to all the Bruce Arians staff and everything, and so, like, I'm intrigued with, like, the Hassan Reddick signing, because if you get Hassan Reddick from, like, 2 or 3 years ago, you're getting a dominant edge rusher who is going to add to, a rotation of a room that has, Vita Vea on the D-line and Kalijah Kancey and Greg Gaines, and then edge rushers like, young dudes like Yaya Diaby, who played pretty well last year, and second-year Chris Braswell. And I think that played a big part of it, is where they see Chris Braswell, developing as far as an edge rusher. So I kind of like that D-line. Is there a star there right now? As far as I believe there was. That's why I thought they would probably take a shot on an edge rusher this year, but I guess they didn't see one with the ceiling that they really wanted. They really liked Agbuka in the first round, and they went that direction. And I listen, you're never going to hear me complain about you drafting an Ohio State receiver. So instead, they kind of went back to their roots of, listen, we'll spend day 2 picks on corners and safeties and things like that. And that's kind of what they did. They drafted Parrish and Morrison. Hope those guys develop as out, one guy as an outside, maybe the other guy's the nickel. Tyke Smith is a versatile guy. Isian is a versatile kind of, slot and free safety guy. And Winfield, he's such a good player. And you look at their linebacking room, Servakia Dennis, Levante David, like they're hoping Servakia Dennis ends up, continuing to progress. But if not, Levante David, like if you're going to take a loss at linebacker, if the rest of your team is good, I feel like linebacker's the spot where you can kind of take like a mid shot at. And again, Levante David's, even like medium grade Levante David is better than a lot of teams' linebacking cores. So I look at the linebacking room and I kind of feel okay with that. They brought in Anthony Walker Jr., who, actually is very familiar with Baker Mayfield from his time with the Cleveland Browns. I think, again, that's a good depth piece to bring in. I think he used to be on the Colts before that. Then he was on the Miami Dolphins. They brought in some Dolphins dudes. Deion Jones is there. I'm not overly excited about him. They also did bring in Shiloh Sanders, Shadur Sanders' brother and son of Deion Sanders. Not sure, what his eventual kind of development will be, but again, along with the rest of that room that they drafted with the Notre Dame corner and also, Jacob Parrish out of Kansas State, I think they have a lot of young dudes mixed with some dudes that they've already seen development out of, and I think they feel very confident in their ability to develop their back end of the room. They don't have being in the NFC South, like they have to play the Falcons, the Saints, who feel like they're kind of going through a gap year right now with losing Derek Carr and having, second round QB that they drafted, Shao being the possible starter, or the guy they drafted 2 years ago out of the out of the 5th round. I'll remember his name eventually, but again, their quarterback room's kind of in a weird flux and in a weird competition with some young dudes. I feel like the Saints are kind of in this weird redevelopment mode. Yes, I do like what the Carolina Panthers have been doing and what the Falcons have been doing at this point, but I don't know if that's enough to go ahead and overturn what the Buccaneers can do, especially if they can return back to that offensive dominance that they were showing a year ago, where they were one of the top offenses in the NFL. And so if they could show some of that ingenuity, they showed some development with the offensive line, and they kept a lot of consistency. A lot of offensive coaches stayed with them and didn't go at Liam Cohen. They hired from within to be the OC. Sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. So, but I think I have enough, at least kind of like feelings about Grizzard, where I go, oh, I'm kind of excited. I'm a little excited about Grizzard, knowing that he was part of the game plan last year, that they know him very well. And then also, like, I mean, dude, Todd Bowles is hitting it out of the park with these OC hires. This is his third OC hire in 3 years. I would hope that, like, he ends up going ahead and hitting the turkey. So I like where the Bucs are. I'm not too scared about it. I am a little worried about the Wirfs situation, especially in addition to the Godwin stuff. If we know more about Godwin's injury and whether he was going to be 100%, I would probably not feel as worried about it. But love Ogbuka, and I like the depth of that receiving core as far as, McMillan and Palmer and Tez Johnson and Sterling Shepard, who just likes to hang out with Baker Mayfield and sometimes make plays when they run out of players. It's just such a nice, friendship that they have there. We'll see what they end up doing as far as replacing the left tackle situation, at least temporarily, if they can get somebody to come in that they feel very confident about. But beyond that, I think the Buccaneers still pretty much are the top chair right now in the South, until proven otherwise, because they've just been doing it so many years in a row. Yes, a lot of luck has been involved in that, but listen, man, a lot of this game is luck.
When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous. About the past and about the future.